So at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, January 7th of this year, pop artist Sia posted the music video for her song, Elastic Heart, on YouTube. Within minutes, the view counter was registering thousands of hits, but Sia had much bigger problems on her hands, alongside the quickly rising clicks of her video. By 7 p.m., Sia posted this Twitter response, quote, "I anticipated some pedophilia cries for this video. All I can say is, Maddie and Shia were two of the only actors I felt could play these two warring Sia self-states. I apologize to those who feel triggered by hashtag Elastic Heart. My intention was to create some emotional content, not to upset anybody," unquote. Today, the music video starring Maddie Ziegler and Shia LaBeouf has some 225 million views. It spawned multiple parodies, it generated both critical acclaim and something of a public outcry in the blogosphere and on social media. Those who cried pedophilia and those who found the work revelatory and wonderful. But my paper, titled Zoophilia and the Beastial Rhetoric of Sia's Elastic Heart, is an attempt to understand why the video caused such a stir on both sides, what it does to audiences, how it does it. To uncover those pieces, I engaged in a generative rhetorical critique of the music video, and I'm honored to present the findings today. So my claim is this. Sia's 2015 music video for Elastic Heart cages its audience, forcing viewers to lash out like animals against predetermined and segregated hierarchies. I believe the responses the video generated are not just visceral reactions to slightly pedophilic imagery or unique choreography. More so, I think those responses are representations of an animalistic jockeying for place in modern Western class systems. I'll explain that in a moment. In this talk, I'll first explain the background of the artists and the performers, as well as the story the video presents. Next, I'll unpack the mechanisms by which the music video captures audiences, elucidating an explanatory schema that's rooted in the traditional Indian caste system of priests, warriors, merchants, servants, and untouchables. Finally, I'll discuss the implications my research has for others who want to engage a kind of bestial rhetoric, as I've labeled it, that's sexualized and violent, but it's also tender, minimalistic, playful. So first, Sia herself. Sia is an Australian pop artist. She rarely shows her face in public. In an op-ed written for Billboard called My Anti-Fame Manifesto, Sia said she doesn't show her face for fear of the sharp-tongued criticisms that are ubiquitous in modern social, entertainment, and news media of fame and celebrity. She often has others stand in for or accompany her to events, Maddie Ziegler being the most common stand-in of late. So Sia co-directed the music video for her song Chandelier, starring Ziegler, the video for Elastic Heart, starring Ziegler, and a new video that dropped last week called Big Girls Cry, starring Ziegler. Maddie Ziegler, a 12-year-old dancer and actress, is the star of Lifetime's Dance Moms. She's been performing in a nude-colored leotard and blonde wig in Sia's stead since last year. In Chandelier, she jumps, she twirls, she flies around a dingy high-rise apartment, almost effortlessly sticking switch leaps, splits, and flips. In Big Girls Cry, she is essentially face dancing. I don't know how else to say it. She's got big expressions, she's being mangled and manipulated by her own hands and others in one continuous medium close-up shot. The video feels like a scathing feminist critique of society's exploitation and oppression of women. And Maddie's an enlightened choice for the face of that critique, I think. Shia LaBeouf, who at 28 has made a career acting in blockbuster movies like Transformers and Indiana Jones, and lesser-known films like Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac. Shia has also created interesting, if sometimes esoteric, performance art pieces. It's often hard to distinguish between his performance art and his very performative life. For example, last year, he staged a performance in LA where he sat in an art gallery for 6 days wearing a tuxedo and a paper bag over his head emblazoned with the words, "I am not famous anymore." He invited visitors to choose one item from a table of implements to bring with them into the room. And then he and his visitors sat there with whatever artifact the person had chosen, a Transformers toy, an Indiana Jones whip, pliers, a ukulele, and other random items. Months after the performance had ended, Shia reported that during the art piece, a woman had stripped him naked and raped him while her boyfriend sat outside, which unfortunately, but also a little bit aptly, brings us to the music video for the song Elastic Heart that was released just 2 months after Shia spoke about that rape. aptly because the responses to the music video were pretty defamatory and awful. It's no wonder Sia has stopped showing her face in public. Also, I venture to guess that many of the people who voiced their hatred of the video aren't familiar with the stylings of modern dance, but that's actually part of my point. I'll get to it later. So, Elastic Heart. Well, it's a 5-minute music video. It takes place entirely in a small, stark warehouse space. In that space is a steel enclosure that looks like the top half of a bird cage. It's probably about 20 feet in diameter, and the bars of the cage are spaced about 12 inches apart, all the way around, and they get a little closer as they near the top, about 12 feet off the ground. So at various points, Maddie easily walks in and out of the cage. Sia could certainly do the same, but he gets frustrated that he can't catch the little girl whom he's after when she steps out. He acts the frustration well, but it's almost farcical that he doesn't just wiggle his way out to catch Maddie. The story of the video basically follows a 3-act structure. The video opens in silence with Sia and Maddie in a standoff on opposite sides of the cage, staring each other down. Both are dirty. Him wearing a nude-colored short with bits of pink paint on his feet and tape-wrapped hands, and sporting a mangy beard. Her in that nude-colored leotard with marker drawings on her hands as well as a bit of pink paint on her feet too. When the music begins, so too does their battle. They circle each other. They're crawling towards each other. They're flailing, flexing, roaring, throwing one against the bars, another seemingly flinging poop. It's a mess. All right, it's ferocious, it's animalistic. And the song matches that epic tone, moving from tender resilience, you cannot break me, I'm still fighting for peace, to raspy pleading. And another one bites the dust, oh, why can I not conquer love? There are moments of stillness that turn violent when Maddie bites the hand that feeds and comforts her. Other times when an escape through the bars is a tease, but it becomes endearing because Maddie re-enters the cage and Sia cradles her like a child as they play a familiar game. They're making faces at each other. The last act ends with silence as Maddie tries to lead Sia out of the cage, but he stops. He slinks down against the bars and dies a heartbreaking death as Maddie kicks, screams, and tugs at him to flee the steel trap. Cut to black. So that's the video and the key players. Let me now explain the results of my coding and the explanatory schema that emerged from that coding. There are 5 main presented elements in the video, what we saw and heard, and the choreography. There's animalistic behavior, playfulness, violence, minimalization, and sexualization. All right, so for example, the playfulness in the funny faces, the minimalism is the clothing, the lack of clothing, lack of color also. The animalistic behavior is the poop flinging. I'm pretty happy I was able to get poop flinging into a scholarly paper. From those presented elements, I reasonably inferred the suggested elements, right? So what comes of those presented elements. So animalistic behavior suggests an uncleanliness, an emphasis on basic needs and desires. The minimalism suggests a joyless, desperate, almost banal state of things. From there, I tried to group the suggested elements into categories, and this is where it got interesting. What emerged from those categories is a kind of stereotypical caste system. Okay, the Brahmins, or priests, the Kshatriyas, or warriors, and the Dalits, or untouchables, being the 3 most prominent. Now, I acknowledge that my categorizing the suggested elements this way might betray my commitments to feminism, social justice, compassion. But remember, I was trying to figure out the rhetoric at play that made people want to lash out. So marginalization is exactly the kind of thing that makes me want to lash out, makes me want to fight back, and makes me want to attack my oppressors. So I can imagine that others might feel the same. Not to mention Indian-American author Lavanya Sankaran, in an article from June 2013 in the New York Times, said, quote, "Caste is not a word modernizing India likes to use, but the forces of democratic politics ensure that it will thrive and never be forgotten as a crucial social index." And classism is very much a reality in the West as well, of course. Arguably, that classism is most obvious in the anonymous comments of internet trolls, whose insecurities might drive their hatred of others. untrained in the intricacies of art and critical analysis, or just ferocious for any myriad reasons, bloggers and tweeters spewed vitriol at the video, at Shia, at Sia, at Maddie's mother, at anyone they could get their hands on. So the question is why? Why might this video lead to people crying foul? And I think the answer is that people don't like to be caged like animals. I know, big shocker. So I also don't mean just literally caged, but placed into classes based on antiquated and discriminatory practices of superiority and domination, pigeonholed and metaphorically caged. Perceptive audiences will note that nearly double the shots in the video are from inside the cage, confining the audience, privileging a system of repression, which makes for a feeling of lashing out from everyone, not just internet trolls. And this is where the two warring factions come in, not in Sia's self-states, as she says, but in those who vehemently support the video and those who discursively bash it. I believe that most people who speak out for or against the video are jockeying for position in a social hierarchy defined by three major classes: the rulers, the soldiers, and the servants. Now, those who identify with the servant class may lash out at the suggested elements like uncleanliness, impurity, unintelligence, labeling the video pedophilic. Those who identify with the parent-child tropes, the omniscient point of view, the tender, protective suggested elements, might label the video touching and wonderful, wanting to hold on to their place as royalty. For the soldiers, I think violence and aggression are innate, and they sort of grab on to those warlike elements in the video, like the hunt, a desire to harm, aggression. These folks may express themselves not to choose sides, but as an outlet, taking to Twitter to release steam or engage in a battle. All of this is to say that people who are caged and assigned a lower social class are not likely to enjoy their place if they identify with that lower social class. Those who consider themselves part of the dominant ruling class might find this bestial rhetoric pleasing, almost artful, and they want to protect their place in the world. And the warriors are just prone to fighting. Put them in a cage, they'll brawl, if only to satisfy their base desires. These people, I imagine, spoke up on both sides, mostly to play devil's advocate. For rhetorics who engage this bestial rhetoric, they might expect these three identities to emerge. So should the rhetor find that the violence that comes from it is too much to handle, the rhetor should search for a method to lift the lower class into the ruling class, honoring the servants with just rewards. For the warriors, the rhetor might allow them space and freedom to fight and play. For the royal protectors, a rhetor might take advantage of and engage their support while simultaneously avoiding exploitation and abuse. Elastic heart, then, is either a joy or a failure. But either way you look at it, your social media activism for or against it is one more reason for Sia to keep her face covered and away from judgment in this unique, kairotic moment.